Greetings and welcome. I'm Mr. C, and today I'm going to talk standard response protocols. You might know this as SRP. You probably have a red folder in your classroom that has details and lists of things that you should and would be doing in the event that a standard response protocol would be called. I'm going to tell you what you're going to hear and then what you're expected to do. These are just going to be quick hits for all these different protocols. These are the 5 that you would hear, and all of these would come with a PA announcement, with a loudspeaker announcement. We're going to talk about what you would do in a hold, a secure, a lockdown, an evacuation, and a shelter, or a shelter, I should say. So we're just going to dive right in. Like I said, these are quick hits. So if you got any questions or any specifics that you can't answer yourself, obviously you would talk to me. If you're in my building, you would talk to somebody in the office where you could find where you could get the relevant information. But make sure you know what these 5 different SRP calls mean, because you're going to act differently when you hear these different calls. And some of them are similar, right? A hold and a secure sounds similar, but they mean different things. So we're going to dive right in. Let's start with a hold. If you hear a hold called over the PA or over the loudspeaker, what that means is we're just going to clear the hallways. We're going to be in our classrooms. It's going to be business as usual in class, but we don't want kids in the hall. Right? So if you got kids in the bathroom, you're going to, let them in when they come back. You're going to get them inside. But we're not going to be going, if you have lunch or recess, or if you're going to PE or art, you're not going to do that. You're going to stay in your classrooms until the hold is lifted. The most standard reasons why this would happen in a school, or if there's a disturbance in the hallway for some reason, somebody might be having a medical emergency and we need to get an ambulance to the school and assist someone in the hallway. We don't want kids walking by something like that. We don't want kids in the hallway, watching and potentially being traumatized if something weird is happening in the hallways. So if you hear a hold, we're keeping kids in the class. If there's some sort of emergency, you would call or radio the office to let them know. But for the most part, barring common sense, you're going to keep kids out of the hallways and in your classroom in the instance of a hold. All right, moving on to the next one, secure. Now, this is a secure would be called when there's something going on outside, and so we don't want kids out there. So the first thing you're going to do is to return kids inside the building if you're out there, or if you know that they're out there, you can help to get kids and staff inside the building. Business as usual is going to be happening in the building, but we're not letting anybody out. So if you have recess, it's going to be inside. If you have some sort of class activity outside, we're not doing that. Or if you're out there, we're going to get you inside. And then we're going to keep everybody in until the secure is lifted. One of the more common reasons that a secure would be called is if something weird is happening in the neighborhood. I know if there's my school is right across from a large open space area. So if there's animals that are seen acting weird in the neighborhood, a secure would be called just to keep kids safe. There might be like dogs roaming around, and we're not sure if they're safe or not. So we want to keep the kids safe until we know that there's no kind of weird thing or threat outside that we have to worry about anymore. So that's what it means to be secure. Get the kids inside. We're going to stay inside. We're not letting anybody out or in until the secure is lifted. The third one is a lockdown. Now, this one would be the most emergent call that you would hear, meaning like the biggest emergency call that you would hear in a building. That means there's a threat inside the building. And this one can be scary, but it's also very important that we know what to do. And this is the most, we're going to follow these protocols more strictly than any other that you might hear called for. A lockdown means that as a teacher or as a professional, you are locking your doors, you are turning off your lights, and you are out of sight. If there is a window in your door, you nor anyone else in that you're supervising should be able to be seen by the window. The lights are off in your room, the doors are locked, and everyone in there is silent. And that means if you hear something going on in the hallway or anything, you are not opening those doors. If there's a police officer that's trying to get into your room for some reason during a lockdown, they will have a key. And if they don't, you're not letting them in. You're not opening the door for anyone for any reason, nor reacting to anything that you hear going on in that hallway for any reason. This is to keep you safe. And there is no excuse for hearing something that's going on in the hallway. If you hear a lockdown called for and you know there's a kid on their way right back, you can sweep that hallway really quick. But once those doors are locked, once those lights are off, you're not opening the door. Anybody that needs to get in for any reason would have a key. And that is what I need you to understand more than anything else. Those doors just don't open. And you are staying as silent and out of sight as possible until that lockdown is lifted. And that might be a long time. And that's just the world that we live in right now, folks. And so make sure that you understand that. All right, moving on to the next one, evacuate. This is what the call sign for evacuate looks like. The first thing I want you to remember, if you hear an evacuation, I don't think I've ever been a part of a school evacuation. But if you are for some reason, and if you hear an evacuation called, grab that phone if you can. I'm not saying to dilly-dally, but grab your phone if you can. And make sure you're grabbing your red SRP folder because it's going to have relevant information in there for you too, specifically our primary evacuation site and our secondary evacuation site. I'm not going to share that with you over the internet right now because we don't want that as public knowledge. But make sure that you know, as a staff member that works in a school, you know where your primary evacuation site is and your secondary evacuation site is. And if you can, grab that phone because you might not have a radio. You're going to have there's going to be kids all over outside the building trying to navigate to an area, and you might need to communicate with someone or have people trying to communicate with you. So having that phone, if possible, is going to be important. And then just keeping calm and making sure that the kids are getting to where they need to be at the primary or secondary site. The most common reason for an evacuation would be like a gas leak. If someone smells gas and you not only need to get out of the building but get away from the building, an evacuation might be called. Again, kind of a weird one, not super common, but make sure you know where those places are. And then finally, a shelter drill. This is what the call sign for a shelter drill looks like. Shelter drill is kind of hazard dependent, depending on where you live and the potential shelter threats that might exist geographically. We're in Colorado. Really, one of the only things that we would have to worry about is tornadoes. We don't really deal with a lot of earthquakes here. If Colorado is flooding, we're in trouble. So, we're not dealing with a lot of floods in Colorado either. But there are tornadoes here sometimes. And so, know the rules for the different hazards. I'll speak to the tornado one in particular. If you're in my building right now, tornado threat would be the one that we would shelter for most consistently. And really the rules of thumb there are you do not want to be in a room where there is an exterior wall, so a wall that touches the outside. And you don't want to be in a room that has windows. That counts skylights too. So if there's a skylight in your room, you don't want to be in that room. If there's a window leading to the outside, you don't want to be in that room. And if there's an exterior wall, you don't want to be in that room. So in interior rooms, or if there's a large central interior room in the building, you will have a shelter map in your SRP red folder where your classroom is expected to go. But if you're in a weird spot and you hear a shelter called, just know these are the rules. Okay? No exterior walls, no windows. If you're in a space that kind of checks those boxes, then you're in a safe place. And I guess that kind of gets into my final point. And I think what's really important here is to use common sense. When these calls are made, we don't always know the exact reason. And you, being in a classroom on the ground outside at the time, might know why, right? If there's an animal running around outside and you know it, and the building is called for a secure, you're going to use common sense. You're going to get inside the building, but you don't want to come across that animal on the way. So yeah, you're trying to get in the building, but you don't want to put yourself in harm's way for any reason. Same thing for a shelter, right? If you hear a shelter called and you're in a room and it starts to fill up with water, don't stay there, right? Like a shelter call means there's some sort of environmental hazard, and if that environmental hazard starts to be near you, you don't want to be there. Use common sense, right? For anyone in all of these calls, if you want to talk scenarios, there's a whole team. There's an SRP team at the school. They're more than happy to talk through scenarios. There's obvious training that goes into knowing what to do and how to do. But again, these are just quick hits on how to act and what to do. And just know that as the adult supervising lots of kids, you may be called on to use common sense in different situations, and just know that you're going to do what you have to do to keep yourself and the students that you're supervising safe. Because that is a number one priority that not only we have as individuals, but what we promise to our families and to our community when they give us these most valuable resources that we have, their children, their babies. So if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, hit me in the comments, or you can find me directly, or you can find the standard response protocol team at the school and ask anybody there, or hit somebody up in the office. All right. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.